Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister and asks, does he stand by his statement, quote, "We can use this time to transform the economy to make us stronger," end quote, and if so, does this transformation involve an economy that uses fewer natural resources and produces less pollution?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I stand by my full statement, which was, and I quote, "We don't tell New Zealanders we can stop the global recession because we can't. What we do tell them is we use this time to transform the economy to make us stronger so that we'll be when the world starts growing again, we can be running faster than other countries we compete with." To the second part of the member's question, this government thinks the country should be making the most of its natural resources, but obviously that needs to be balanced against environmental considerations. I note that the Greens Budget Paper 2011 actually takes a similar line, arguing for more efficient use of natural resources to help grow the manufacturing and agricultural sectors of the economy.
Dr Russel.
Supplementary. Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, why is he adding around $800 million to the deficit to subsidise free allocation of units under the emissions trading scheme when a fair price on carbon would both help balance the government's books and create the right incentives for the economy to transform to a more sustainable footing?
The Right Honourable Prime
Mr. Speaker,
Minister.
the first point I'd make is this government does have a fair price on carbon. The second point I'd make is that New Zealand as a country signed up to an international agreement to maintain emissions at a 1990 level, and what the government did in putting together the emissions trading scheme was to reflect the fact that those property rights of those credits that are earned by foresters should stay with foresters. Now the reality is where a company exceeds their 1990 levels, then they actually pay themselves for those emissions and those credits, and they can either choose to reduce their bottom line or pass that on to the consumers of New Zealand.
Dr Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Prime Minister agree with the OECD, which says that we should strengthen the price signals in the ETS in order to protect our environment and the integrity of our clean green brand?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I think this government's always taken a balanced view in terms of economic growth and caring and maintaining the environment.
Dr Russell Norman.
Point of order.
Point of order, Dr Russell Norman.
Mr Speaker, I agree I was asking an opinion question, but it was about a specific report by the OECD, and I don't know that the Prime Minister addressed that particular issue.
I thought the member asked whether you agreed with something, and the Prime Minister, I thought, gave the impression that agreed pretty much with what the member was highlighting his question, but I might be wrong on that. But supplementary question, Dr Russell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Has the Prime Minister read the latest OECD country report on New Zealand that highlights our inefficient use of natural resources like water, and why will he not consider a resource charge on commercial water use to raise some revenue for the government while giving a price signal around the efficient use of water?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, from memory, I have read the OECD country report. What I would say is that the government is making steps actually towards getting a more efficient use of water. That was the aim of, firstly, the National Policy Statement, but also the work that's been happening with the Land and Water Forum. The government signalled that there's more work to be done there, and the member makes a fair point that water is a very critical resource for New Zealand. We can grow our economy if we use it wisely, and we will need to think about ways to ensure that there's an efficient use of water while maintaining both its quality and the river flows in general.
Dr Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Why is the government ignoring the advice of the OECD, the IMF and the Savings Working Group that have all found New Zealand is an outlier in not having a comprehensive tax on capital gains, and the absence of which undermines government revenue and also the competitiveness of the productive sector because all the capital flows into the housing market?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, the first thing I'd say, this probably wouldn't be the week to be quoting the IMF. The second thing I'd say, Mr Speaker, is if one goes and has a look at the tax working group and their analysis of a capital gains tax, what the tax working group actually went on to say was, on balance, the majority of the experts did not actually agree with the capital gains tax because of its inefficiency and its difficulty to apply. And, Mr Speaker, once one starts taking a domestic family home out of a capital gains tax, then actually it becomes a more inefficient tax.
Point of order, Dr. Russell Norman.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister may have misheard me. I said the savings working group, not the tax working group. I acknowledge the tax working group didn't come down on the side of the CGT, but the savings working group did. It's a very different group.
If the member is absolutely certain that that's what he said, I mean, I thought I heard what the Prime Minister answered, but if the member wants to repeat his question then to avoid the
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Why is he ignoring the advice of the OECD, the IMF and the Savings Working Group that have found that New Zealand is now an outlier in not having a comprehensive tax on capital gains, the absence of which seriously undermines government revenue and also directs capital into the non-productive sector?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think this is the week to be looking closely at the IMF, and I prefer the advice of the tax working group than the savings working group.
Supplementary, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Why is the government risking a double-dip recession due to spending cuts and a credit downgrade due to record borrowing when raising some targeted revenue avoids both of these dire consequences and shifts the economy onto a more sustainable footing?
The Right Honourable Prime
Well,
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the analysis from Treasury is that far from risking a double-dip recession, the government is putting the economy in a very strong position to grow both real after-tax wages and the employment levels in New Zealand, to get the country back into surplus and to deliver an economic base from which New Zealanders can enjoy a brighter future.
Question.
Point of order.
Point of order, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I seek leave to table the Green Budget Paper 2011, which lays out 5 costed initiatives the government can take to reduce government debt and shift the economy to a more sustainable footing.
Order. Can I just check, is this a press release that the Green Party's made? No, this is
No, it's a budget paper, Mr.
budget
Speaker.
paper. Leave us. Order. Leave us to table that document. Is there any objection? There is objection. I'm sorry. Question number 4, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.